When Eilat Mazar realized she discovered an ancient structure near Jerusalem, she turned to the Bible to help explain what she found.
For thousands of years, the name King Solomon has carried a weight few rulers ever reached. He was remembered as a wise king, a builder, and a figure tied to the deepest parts of faith and history. But one mystery around him never settled. Where was his final resting place? Researchers have searched through ancient ruins, broken stone, old records, and forgotten chambers, looking for the place history refused to give up. And when a sealed tomb connected to Solomon's world was finally opened, the discovery did not feel like a simple archaeological moment. It felt darker. There was no need for a golden crown or a room full of treasure to make people uneasy. Sometimes the most disturbing thing inside an ancient tomb is not what shines. It is what warns you to stop. The strange part is that this chamber seemed to carry more than age. It carried fear, silence, and the feeling that someone long ago wanted the dead left alone. So what did researchers find when they opened the tomb linked to King Solomon's world? And why did the first sign inside the stone feel more like a threat than a discovery? King Solomon stands at the center of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, remembered as the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem. Yet after nearly 3,000 years, his grave has never been confirmed. No tomb has been identified, no burial chamber opened, and no inscription in the archaeological record has named him. Solomon's reign is traditionally placed around 970 to 931 BCE, not 5,000 years ago. But the real mystery is still powerful. A king remembered for 3 millennia, tied to the holiest city in the ancient world, left behind no confirmed grave, no marked tomb, and no final chamber archaeologists can point to with certainty. The city of David sits on a narrow ridge just south of the Temple Mount, and excavations there have continued for decades. This area has produced more material from Solomon's era than any other site. Directly across from it, in the limestone cliffs of Silwan, is a tomb complex many scholars identify as the strongest candidate for the Davidic royal burials. One Silwan tomb produced a Hebrew inscription removed in the 19th century. Nahman Avigad, the Israeli archaeologist, translated it in 1953, and the inscription now sits in the British Museum. The words were not carved as decoration. They were aimed at the person who would one day break into that chamber. The message is a curse. Someone placed a warning at the entrance of the dead, meant to protect what was sealed inside. That is where this investigation begins. Not with gold, not with legend, but with a tomb near Jerusalem that still seems to speak from Solomon's world. The tomb is real, the inscription is real, and the warning was carved for the person who opened it. Now the investigation begins with the curse itself, and the exact words left inside the stone. A local resident reported the inscription in 1870 near a tomb entrance in Silwan, East Jerusalem. It did not come from a controlled excavation. It surfaced during a period of tomb robbing in the Kidron Valley, passed through antiquities dealers, and eventually reached the British Museum, registered as 1879-1007.1. Nahman Avigad gave the stone its first complete scholarly reading in 1953. As an Israeli archaeologist and major figure in ancient Hebrew epigraphy, he studied the damaged letters carved into limestone nearly 2,700 years ago. His translation turned the object from a broken tomb inscription into a direct warning from the dead. Avigad's translation reads, "This is the sepulchre of Yahu, who is over the house. There is no silver and gold here, but his bones and the bones of his slave wife are with him. Cursed be the man who opens this." The wording is plain, but the message is not ordinary. 3 details make the inscription difficult to ignore. The name ending in Yahu is partly destroyed, leaving the owner uncertain. The line denying silver and gold sounds defensive, as if grave robbers were expected. Then comes the curse, using the Hebrew root Ra, the same kind of language used for divine curses in the Hebrew Bible. Gabriel Barkay of Bar Ilan University is among the scholars who identified this Silwan tomb complex as a possible burial ground of the Davidic dynasty. The inscription stood above a rock-cut tomb made for 2 people. a man described as over the house and his slave wife. Its warning was carved exactly where an intruder would see it. The inscription exists, the translation is documented, and the curse is aimed at whoever opens the tomb. But the strangest line comes before the curse. There is no silver and gold here. Why would anyone carve that above a grave? Most ancient Near Eastern tomb inscriptions followed a familiar pattern: prayers for the dead and warnings against anyone who disturbed the grave. The royal steward inscription does something more unusual. Its line, "There is no silver and gold here," is a defensive statement. Epigraphers treat it as specific, because tombs did not normally deny treasure unless people expected treasure inside. "Who is over the house" is the title that makes the warning more serious. In Hebrew, the phrase is Asher al-Habayit, a known official rank in texts like 2 Kings 15:5 and Isaiah 22:15. It described the chief steward of the royal household, a senior official trusted with estates, accounts, and royal administration. A chief steward serving the Davidic dynasty would not have been an ordinary official. He worked near the wealth of Solomon's court, managed royal property, and carried public association with palace resources. So when his tomb denied silver and gold, it reads less like modesty and more like a warning to people who assumed he had access to royal treasure. Naaman Avigad connected the tomb's owner to Shebna, the official criticized in Isaiah 22:15-16 for carving himself a tomb on the height. If that identification is right, the inscription belonged to a named biblical figure, a royal steward rebuked in prophetic literature for building an elaborate burial during the height of Davidic power. The treasure denial becomes disturbing because of the full combination: a man in the Silwan royal tomb complex, holding the title of chief financial officer connected to Jerusalem's ruling house, and carving a public denial of treasure above his grave. He knew what people would come looking for. The curse was there to stop them. The denial and the curse point to a tomb built for someone people expected to rob. Now the investigation moves to Silwan itself, the cliffside necropolis where royal burials may have hidden in plain sight. Silwan Necropolis sits on the slopes of the Mount of Olives, directly across from the city of David. Its limestone cliffs are cut with ancient rock-hewn tombs facing the ridge where 1 Kings 11:43 places Solomon's burial. Solomon rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of his father David. Gabriel Barkay of Bar-Ilan University and Amos Kloner are among the scholars who have identified Silwan as the strongest candidate for the royal burials of the Davidic dynasty. The reason is not legend alone. The complex contains tombs carved as early as the 10th century BCE, the traditional period of Solomon. Royal Steward Inscription Tomb is only one chamber inside this larger complex, and it is not the oldest. Some Silwan tombs appear to predate it by 200 to 250 years, placing them directly in Solomon's traditional era. The same limestone cliffs may preserve burials cut by workers living close to the generation of Solomon himself. Silwan Necropolis has never been comprehensively excavated. Its location inside a Palestinian residential neighborhood in East Jerusalem makes the work politically sensitive and physically difficult. Archaeologists cannot simply clear the area, because excavation would mean working beneath and around occupied homes, streets, and structures built over the ancient tombs. Ancient burial chambers in Silwan have even been absorbed into modern residential buildings. Homes now stand inside, above, and around tombs carved nearly 3,000 years ago. If this is the burial ground of Solomon's dynasty, then part of that royal cemetery is not locked behind museum glass. People are living inside it. The site is real, and its connection to Davidic royalty is not based on guesswork alone. Now, the investigation turns from the tomb complex to Solomon's Jerusalem and what archaeology has actually found from his world. In The Bible Unearthed, published in 2001, Israel Finkelstein of Tel Aviv University and Neil Asher Silberman argued that Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE was not the vast royal capital described in the Bible. In their reading, Solomon's city looked more like a modest highland settlement than the center of a great empire. Using ceramic typology and stratigraphic analysis, Their work compared pottery, architecture, and settlement layers across Israel and Jordan. The material linked to Solomon's traditional period did not show the scale expected from a superpower. It suggested a regional kingdom, not the empire needed for the grand first temple described in Scripture. Biblical archaeology has been divided ever since. Minimalist scholars lean toward what the ground shows, while maximalist scholars give more weight to the biblical account. Eilat Mazar entered that debate in 2005 when her City of David excavations identified a large stone structure she associated with Solomon's palace, a claim Finkelstein disputed as later. After Eilat Mazar's death in 2021, the argument did not end. Her identifications remain contested in scholarly literature because the larger problem remains unresolved. The text describes royal power, but the ground gives a thinner record. Between Jerusalem, Solomon, and the 10th century BCE, archaeology still has not produced a clear consensus. Finkelstein's research gives the tomb mystery its heavier meaning. Solomon, one of the most celebrated kings in the religious memory of half the world, has no confirmed grave and no physical empire that all scholars accept. The same king remembered for unmatched wealth is also the king whose burial place, palace, and scale remain difficult to find. The ground does not erase Solomon, but it makes the search for him harder. Now the investigation turns to the methods researchers use to look for a royal tomb in Silwan, especially when the place itself is not fully accessible. Epigraphy is the main tool used to understand the royal steward inscription. This method studies ancient writing, letter shapes, language, date, and historical setting. Naaman Avigad's 1953 analysis remains the scholarly base for what researchers know about the tomb owner's words, carved in ancient Hebrew on limestone. Avigad's Shebna identification is important, but it is not certain. The broken name on the stone ends in Yahu, while the first part is missing. His link to Shebna from Isaiah 22 is a careful hypothesis, not a confirmed reading. The inscription tells us the title, not the full identity. Ground Penetrating Radar, or GPR, gives researchers a way to look beneath Silwan without opening every chamber. Around the City of David, this method can detect voids, walls, tunnels, and hidden rooms near known tombs. For a site inside East Jerusalem, that non-invasive approach matters because excavation is politically and physically difficult. GPR results still have limits. A detected void beside the royal steward tomb could show that another chamber exists, but it cannot reveal bones, artifacts, names, or royal identity. The radar sees shape, not ownership. It can point researchers toward a hidden space, but it cannot say whether Solomon or any Davidic figure was buried there. Ceramic typology and stratigraphic analysis help date the surrounding layers. Recent City of David work connected to Yuval Gadot and Yifta Shalev of Tel Aviv University uses pottery to identify material from the 10th century BCE. Pottery can place a burial in Solomon's era, but it cannot prove whose body was inside. The methods can date the stone, map hidden chambers, and place tombs inside the right period. But when all the evidence is brought together, the picture becomes more complicated than any single tool can explain. Silwan Necropolis gives the investigation its firmest ground. Rock-cut tombs in the complex reach back to the 10th century BCE, the traditional period of Solomon. One later tomb, dated around 700 BCE, held the royal steward inscription, now in the British Museum. Its warning includes a curse against opening the tomb and a direct denial of silver and gold. Davidic royal burials are the strongest supported explanation for the Silwan complex. The tombs from the 10th century BCE may belong to the royal world of Solomon's era, while the royal steward tomb belongs to the court environment of his successors. Even if it is not Solomon's grave, it sits inside the burial landscape of his dynasty. Solomon's specific tomb remains unidentified. No chamber in Silwan has produced his name, and no unexcavated space has been proven to hold his burial. Avigad's connection between the inscription's owner and Shebna is also uncertain, because the broken name on the stone cannot be fully read. That missing name keeps the case open. City of David excavations by Yuval Gaddo and Yifta Shalev have produced documented Iron Age II material from Solomon's traditional period, but none of it identifies his burial. The record shows a real ancient settlement, yet scholars still argue over whether it reflects a modest regional center or the royal capital described in the Bible. Finkelstein's research argues that Jerusalem's material record does not match the biblical scale of Solomon's empire. Mazar's research points to structures she saw as evidence of royal administration from that period. Between minimalist and maximalist readings, no consensus exists. The evidence confirms the tombs, the curse, and the controversy, but not Solzmon's final resting place. The evidence reaches close to Solomon's world, but it stops before naming his grave. The next problem is not only what has been found, it is what still cannot be fully examined. Silwan Necropolis currently lies inside a Palestinian residential neighborhood in East Jerusalem, and that location controls everything researchers can do. Excavation here is not just a matter of opening stone chambers. It means navigating political disputes, local community concerns, jurisdictional limits, and the reality that ancient tombs now sit beneath lived-in streets and homes. Ancient burial chambers in Silwan have been built into the modern neighborhood itself. Some homes stand directly inside or above tombs carved nearly 3,000 years ago. A full excavation would mean disturbing occupied housing, breaking into private spaces, and possibly removing structures. Under current conditions, that is both practically difficult and politically impossible. Israel Antiquities Authority excavations have taken place in the City of David, directly beside the Silwan Necropolis, and those digs have produced important material from the ancient city. But the full tomb complex has never been systematically surveyed. If Solomon's burial chamber is somewhere inside that network, it may remain untouched simply because researchers have never been able to reach it. Royal Steward inscription carries the line, "Cursed be the man who opens this." And the strange part is how literally the tomb has stayed protected, not by visible supernatural force, but by layers of human life built over Jerusalem across 3,000 years. Houses, streets, politics, and ownership have done what the curse warned outsiders not to do. East Jerusalem's political reality gives the mystery its sharpest modern edge. The possible resting place of a king revered in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam may sit beneath a neighborhood where control of the land remains contested. The question is not only archaeological anymore, it is historical, religious, political, and deeply human. And that is why the investigation cannot simply dig its way to an answer. The site is not sealed by legend. It is sealed by stone, homes, politics, and time. Now the investigation turns to the competing explanations for what the evidence means, and why Solomon's tomb remains just out of reach. Mainstream biblical archaeologists begin with the hardest fact: no confirmed tomb of Solomon has been found. The Royal Steward inscription belongs to a later official, not to Solomon himself, and its date around 700 BCE places it roughly 250 years after Solomon's death. Finkelstein and Silberman also argue that the material record from Solomon's era reflects a more modest kingdom than the Bible describes. That reading is strongly supported by the current evidence. Silwan Necropolis gives the strongest alternative reading. The complex contains 10th century BCE tombs from Solomon's traditional period, and many scholars see it as the likely burial ground of the Davidic dynasty. In this view, Solomon's chamber may still be inside the unsurveyed parts of the complex. The Royal Steward inscription would belong to a successor's court, while the older sealed chambers may belong to the dynasty's earlier kings. Babylonian destruction in 586 BCE creates the more speculative explanation. Some could argue that Solomon's tomb was destroyed, hidden, or moved by the Babylonians or by later people trying to protect it. But this theory has no specific archaeological proof. No record shows a deliberate relocation, and no trace confirms a targeted destruction of his grave. Without evidence, it remains the weakest reading. Documented evidence points most strongly toward the middle position. Silwan is the most credible candidate for the Davidic royal burial ground, and the lack of full excavation comes from modern limits, not ancient disappearance. The disturbing finding is the combination: a curse inscription denying treasure, a tomb complex linked to royal officials, and an archaeological record that challenges the grand image of Solomon's Jerusalem. Researchers have found a real tomb complex, a real warning, and a real denial of silver and gold. They have also found that the ground does not easily match the scale of Solomon's empire as remembered by tradition. But the chamber most likely to answer the deepest question remains sealed by homes, politics, and access. The mystery survives because the most important space has not been reached. The evidence does not name Solomon, but it keeps leading back to the same cliffside tombs. The final question is simple. If his grave is there, what would it mean to open it? Royal Steward inscription in the British Museum, catalogued as 1879-1007. 1. Remains the strongest physical witness from this burial world. Translated by Naaman Avigad in 1953 and carved around 2,700 years ago, it does not begin with glory. It begins as a warning to the person who would open the tomb. Silwan necropolis keeps the larger question alive. Researchers have identified 10th century BCE tombs inside the complex, matching Solomon's traditional era. Multiple scholars connect the site with the Davidic royal burials, yet parts of the complex remain unsurveyed and inaccessible. The investigation is not finished because the most important chambers still cannot be reached. Finkelstein and Silberman gave the mystery its hardest background. Their research argued that Jerusalem in Solomon's era does not match the biblical image of a vast empire. That makes the finding more disturbing than one inscription alone. Every search for the physical Solomon keeps running into the same problem. The ground gives less than tradition promised. The treasure denial is the sharpest line in the whole case. "There is no silver and gold here," was carved for intruders who expected wealth. A royal official of Solomon's dynasty, buried in the Silwan tomb complex, denied having what everyone believed such a man could access. Whether it was truth or misdirection, the stone cannot say. Solomon's burial may still lie somewhere in Silwan, inside a chamber never opened, never surveyed, and never confirmed. If those barriers were ever removed, the result could either strengthen a tradition held by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam for 3,000 years, or challenge it in the very place the curse tried to protect. No final answer sits in the museum case, and no confirmed name has appeared on the stone. The tomb still waits in East Jerusalem, protected by rock, politics, and the weight of 3,000 years.